Maybe you've noticed how, despite our best efforts to improve teaching strategies, some students still sit back as increasingly passive learners, waiting for learning to happen to them. And some, if not all of us, have a growing concern that our education system prepares students for today's tests, but might not be preparing them for tomorrow's challenges. We all want to see our students become masters of their circumstances rather than victims. So today's speaker, James Anderson, has taken on the mission of transforming school cultures around the world by raising their status of learning from an act to an art. He's best known in Romania as the author of his bestseller, Learnership, but he's also the creator of Learnership Matrix and the Mindset Continuum, where he took psychologist Carol Dweck's growth mindset theory to a whole new level. And as a result, his partnerships with schools have been recognized as finalists in the Australian Education Awards, with principals reporting their students becoming more persistent, increasingly taking on challenges and developing higher aspirations. And I guess we would all like a little bit more of that during our classes, wouldn't we? So for all of that and much more, James is here with us today to help us tackle an essential question regarding today's education. How can one help students turn challenges into opportunities for sustainable learning? Or in other words, how can we build healthy relationships between students and their challenges? James, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being here with us and our Romanian teachers. Whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. Many of you will know I was in Romania, oh goodness, a while ago now, a year or two ago, and it holds a very special place in my heart now. I've got a strong connection with several schools in Romania, and it's been an absolute thrill, of course, to have the book translated into Romanian. We've got a lot to get through today. I've tried to pack in as much as I can into these 2 hours. To help us as we go through, my wonderful producer, Jane, is with us today. You might see her in the chat box. You see her in the panelist section here. Jane will be fielding some questions. You might hear her voice later on as she sort of translates some of the questions back to me, because I would very much like to hear from your questions, from your interests, what resonates with you. If you want me to sort of stop and go into one topic in more detail, I will do that, because I'm here to serve you tonight, or this morning for you. It's early evening for me. A few things about today. What are we doing today? So a couple of things we're talking about today. As Sebastian said, we're talking about building a relationship with challenge. And that's kind of an odd thing to talk about, because we just talk normally about challenges. And we know that some people like them and some people don't, and we sort of ask why. And we're going to talk about how you get that relationship with challenge. How do we communicate that relationship? How do we build that relationship? And I'm going to give you some resources, a whole lot of phrase books, and a very, very special peek at an AI tool that I want you to look at as well. During the session, I'm going to give you these guides and resources, and Jane is going to drop into the chat box now. And this is going to be our challenge, because I can see down here the chat box is going very, very quickly. But Jane's going to drop a link to my website where you can download most of today's resources. I noticed as I was doing the final preparation just beforehand that there's one or two things that I'm about to promise you that aren't actually in that resource pack. And so if you download the resource pack now, I will make sure the rest of the resources get to you in the next day or so. There's a series of infographics in there. Some of them are infographics to go in your staff room, giving you language, giving you ideas, giving you insights, giving you summaries that you can, after today, put up in your office, put up in your staff room as a reminder of the key learning. And I think, judging from some of the other teachers that I work with, you'll find those very, very powerful. There's also a handful of classroom posters that talks about challenge, that talks about making challenge your friend. Really interesting concept, making challenge your friend. And so a whole bunch of things that I want you to use in your classrooms following today. As I hinted at a moment ago, I have an AI tool. Now, I'm going to give you a preview of this. I'll show you how you can get access to it. And the access will be through a very, very special offer I'll give you at the end of the session. But certainly what I'm giving you today is the groundwork, the foundation, the insights that you need to start helping your students build more positive relationships with challenge. But before I get into the nature of challenge and how we build that relationship, I want to ask you a question. Why do your students come to school? If you asked your students, why do you come to school? You can test it out tomorrow morning. Well, in fact, don't do it tomorrow morning. If you're at school tomorrow morning, go home. It's the weekend. But on Monday morning, go up to your students and say, why do you come to school? And I'm betting that most of them will say, I come to school to learn. Now, if you ask primary students why they come to school, they'll say, I come to school to learn to read and write and maths and things like that. If you ask secondary students why they come to school, they'll say, I come to school to learn to be a, or do a, or go to university or something like that. But we all understand that the purpose of school is to learn. This is the important question. After they've said that, ask them, how do you learn? Because in my experience, when you ask most students, how do you learn? Most of them say, I listen to the teacher, I do what I'm told, I try hard. Those sorts of ideas. Which means every student got the first question wrong. Our students aren't coming to school to learn. Our students think they're coming to school to be taught. And that's the foundation of what we're talking about here. That if students are coming to school expecting to have learning done to them, they have no ownership, they have no control, and they certainly don't have the capacity to drive their own learning. But I'll tell you where this work goes. One of the schools I work with in New Zealand, a place called Glenview Primary School, they had one of their students that had been working with learnership for 2 or 3 years, left the school just because, moving to a different part of the country. At the new school, the principal sat down and asked that question, how do you learn? Now, the principal was expecting the, I listened to the teacher, I behaved myself answer. The answer he got from this 8-year-old student went on for 15 minutes. The student talked about how they engaged in their learning zone, how they knew what their learning zone felt like and how it was different to their performance zone and to their comfort zone and to their aspirational zone. They talked about how they try to achieve growth and don't worry so much about standard. They talked about their problem-solving superpowers and how they were developing those superpowers to future-proof themselves. And it went on and on and on. And the principal at the new school rang up Carl Allen, the principal at Glenview Primary School, and said, what are you doing there? I couldn't have answered that question so well. I've never had a student understand themselves as a learner as well as that student did. And that's really important, because what's going on in the schools that adopt learnership is they're teaching students how to be learners. Most of the work we do in schools is about the learning, the content, the standards, those things that we teach the students. But schools that adopt learnership, schools that have embraced the ideas that I talk about in here, focus not just on the learning, but creating learners. And most schools don't do that. As Sir Ken put it, that most systems treat students as the part of the treat students as the receiver, the part of the system that's being acted upon. And we hear that in the language we use. We talk about high impact teaching strategies. The idea that we teach, they learn. And what that does is it leads students to be passive in their learning. They wait to be rescued. They wait to be told. They wait to be guided. And what Sebastian was talking about in the introduction was teaching our students to lean into challenge, to know how they learn, like that student at Glenview Primary School, to understand themselves as learners and to become skillful at it. Because one of the things I talk about early in the book is that John Holt mentioned this, that learning is not the product of teaching. Just stop and think about that for a moment. Learning is not the product of teaching. Ultimately, learning is the product of the activity of learners. You can learn without a teacher, but you can't teach without a learner. At the end of the day, it's what the students do in the classroom. And that's why, whether you just do this work today and you've come along today to go, oh, what's this stuff about challenge, and you go away and just work with that, or whether you embrace this idea and make it part of your classroom, part of your school, part of your culture, the goal here is to raise the status of learning from an act, something you do or have done to you, to an art. To think of learning as something that is beautiful and skillful, something that is done to a level of expertise. Most of us don't think of learning that way. We weren't brought up that way. We think of expertise in maths and expertise in writing and expertise in sport and all those sorts of areas. But the idea that learning itself can be done skillfully is foreign to most of us and nearly all our students. And if you take nothing else away from today, other than you go back into your classrooms next week and start talking to students about how well they learn, to start looking at the process of learning, the learners themselves, how they engage in it, as a skill that can be recognized as something beautiful, something that makes you go, wow, when it's done well. Because that's what learnership's all about. Learnership is the skill of learning, and it starts with this idea of challenge. That learnership is the expertise a person develops in learning. You develop it through practice, not through practicing what you are learning, by practicing how you are learning. And in the context of today's workshop, it's all about developing that relationship with challenge. Because what you get as you develop learnership is you get more out of every learning opportunity, out of every challenge, out of every lesson. You grow more and more and more based on how skillfully you can engage in it. You know, I know that you're skillful teachers. I've been to Romania, I've met many Romanian teachers, and I know that you're passionate, you're dedicated, and you're highly skilled. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But as Sebastian mentioned at the start of the session, we spend a lot of time training teachers to be expert in the skill of teaching, which we should do. But I reckon you're pretty good already. What I'm on about today is training students to be experts in the skill of learning. And I think about a classroom like this. Now, some of you will recognize these two people. Others, if you were born, well, after me, might not recognize them. This is Jane Torval and Christopher Dean. They're two figure skaters. In the 1984 Olympics, they blitzed. They were the stars of the show. And the reason I think about what goes on in a classroom like this is because you're an expert teacher. You're Jane Torval. You're expert at what you do. But what the learners do isn't the same thing. Right? It's complementary. You go together, expert teaching and expert learning together. And when we've got expert teaching, which we've got largely in our classrooms, we can always improve, but I think we're pretty good. And we couple that with expert learning, what we get is student growth. And that's what I want to talk about. How do we leverage challenge today to maximize student growth? Because when we've got expert teaching, expert learning, I can walk past your classroom and go, what's going on in there from the teacher and the learner is phenomenal. and the result is the learner achieving more growth. So, how are we going to do that? The first thing we need to understand when we're talking about the idea of learnership, let me pull this up. Learnership, the skill of learning, involves 5 different elements. When we talk about English or language, we talk about reading, writing, listening, speaking. When I talk about learnership, we talk about a student's relationship to challenge, their relationship to it. We talk about how they develop their habits of mind, what I refer to as their problem-solving superpowers, what they do when they don't know what to do. When they step into that challenge, what do? Like, it's challenging because you don't know what to do. And the short answer is you've got to draw on these and develop these habits of mind. It relates to how students talk about mistakes. And we're going to talk a little bit about this today, but there'll be more of that in a future opportunity. But mistakes give you direction. Mistakes give you information. But we've largely misunderstood them. We used to tell kids they were bad. And I know there's a big cultural thing in Romania where a lot of kids want to get it right. They don't want to make mistakes. They see mistakes as judgment. But when we turn around and say to kids, no, mistakes are part of learning, they go, no, they're not. I get judged by mistakes. And they're right. And so we need to deepen our understanding of what we mean by mistakes. And in my work, I talk about 6 different types of mistakes. It's about feedback, and I've written feedback and advice there because I've got a new book coming out later this year called From Feedback to Advice. And what I talk about in that book is the idea that what we've been taught, thinking about the Jane Torval, Christopher Dean thing, our side of the feedback process has been to take control of it, to identify what students need, work out how to give it to them, make sure it's timely and actionable and specific, and then deliver the feedback, the quality feedback, to students. And the students sit there and go, okay, do I do something with this now, do I? They've got no control. They've got no control over the feedback process. And so what this book is about giving students control of the feedback process. And instead of giving students feedback, we teach them to ask for advice. They identify their learning needs. They identify their questions. We work through a process where we release responsibility for that feedback process back to the students. And the last one is effort, and we'll touch a little bit on effort today. You can think about it this way. We're starting with challenge today for a really important reason. Challenge is the pathway to growth. Without challenge, there is no growth. But challenging students, just challenging them, isn't enough. If all you do in the classroom is set challenges for students, not much is going to happen. In fact, it may actually backfire. A lot of students will fail and fail and fail and go, no, not doing it anymore. We've got to do more than just set the challenge. We're then going to give them the tools, the habits of mind to solve that challenge, know how to get the information from mistakes and feedback, and how to invest their effort to drive that growth. So the story of learnership is one where challenge is the pathway to growth. The habits of mind are the verbs, the actions that take you down that path. Mistakes and feedback or advice keep you going in the right direction. They give you the information that works you towards the solution, towards the growth. And the effort drives the journey over time. And so to really do justice to learnership, we need to look at all these different levels. As you build relationship with each of these 5 elements, you get these 6 levels of learnership. Now, we're not going to go through all of these today, but just to recognize, you've got beginner to expert in writing, or you've got white belt to black belt in martial arts. We go up the levels of learnership. And I want you for today's workshop just to look carefully at this part. How the relationship changes for challenge. That at the non-learner level of learnership, you avoid challenge. You don't want any of it. Then you reduce the challenge or limit the challenge to just doing your best. Then you attempt challenges or accept the ones that are given to you. Then you target and eventually you embrace challenges. Think about that for a minute. Think about what your classroom would be like if your students embraced challenges. In the spirit of JFK, we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. At Taradale Intermediate School, a school I work with in New Zealand, their students, having worked with learnership for a couple of years, their principal comes up to me the other day and says, for the first time ever, our students feel like they have skin in the game. Their students feel like they have ownership over the learning process. So they're coming up to teachers and saying, Miss, this is too easy for me. Can I have something harder, please? They've built a relationship with challenge that says, class is going to start, class is going to finish. Why would I waste that time when I can use it growing? It's awesome to see what's going on. And so, whoops, that's what I want to do there. When we talk about challenge, when we talk about why this is important, it is the only path that leads to growth. Now, what other paths might we consider? We might consider repetition, doing more and more and more and more. We might consider doing bulk work, lots of easy stuff, filling our time, consuming things. None of those things lead to growth. Repetition leads to reliability and consolidation. Doesn't make you better. Doing lots of things just keeps you busy. It doesn't make you better. And so if we want students to actually grow, to make things possible that were previously impossible, they have to develop a relationship with challenge. So let's get started with this work. I'm seeing lots of things. I've got the chat box just down below the camera here, so I can sort of see it go past. Hard for me to read the Romanian stuff, I'll give you that. But Jane will yell out if there are things that I need to deal with. I am going to be asking you in a few minutes to give me some of your thoughts and answer some of your questions here. But this is what I want to start talking about. If we're going to build a relationship with challenge, help our students understand challenge, then the first thing they need to understand is that learning isn't learning. I'll say that again. Learning's not learning in the sense that learning's not one-dimensional. Most of our students think learning is just following the instructions. And they wonder why some days following the instructions is really easy and other days they go, oh, I can't do this. And it's because we talk about learning as if it's got one dimension, and it doesn't. It has at least four. Most of us go through a learning process like this, that in the beginning, growth is rapid. Right? The early stages of a new topic, we can just jump in there and do it. It's easy. And we tend to enjoy that. That feels good. Finishing things off, getting tasks done. But then we reach this point where progress slows, and stops. Just in the chat box, give me a Y for yes if you've experienced this pattern in your own growth or in students' growth. How many people have done that? Oh, there's big questions coming in, all in Romanian. Just put a Y in the chat box if you've seen that. Yes. 3 of you, that's good. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now we're getting through. We all found our keyboards. Good. This is perfectly normal. I mean, sometimes we refer to this as the performance plateau or the bar. This area down here, where growth is rapid, this is what we call our comfort zone. Now, our comfort zone is full of things that we've mastered a long time ago. Most of you, I imagine, if I put you in a grade 2 classroom as a student, it'd be all right, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd cope with that. That'd be, you'd get by. But one of the things we do poorly in our classrooms is we tell students something like this. We say, come on, you've got to try, get outside your comfort zone and try something new. Now, we've all said that. It's a throwaway phrase that we've been told all our lives. Get outside your comfort zone, try something new. And the problem with that is that your comfort zone is full of things you've already done, but it's also full of what I call easy things you haven't done yet. Right? The world is full of things you could do, things you've got the ability to do that you just never got around to doing. Like, for example, I don't knit, the knitting stuff, but I've got reasonable hand-eye coordination. I know how to follow instructions. And I reckon if someone sat down with me for an hour or two, I could be well on my way to knitting my first scarf. I might not be doing, fancy patterns, but I could get the basics pretty quick. I've never done it, but if I was asked to do it, if I needed to do it, I could do it easily. And that's an example of something that's in your comfort zone and new. And one of the things that we do is we ask kids to, choose a challenge to take on. And what we say to them is do something you haven't done before. And a lot of them have worked it out. They're not going to choose something up here. They're going to choose this because we haven't differentiated between our comfort zone and this zone here, which is our performance zone. And our performance zone is where we do our best. It's where we concentrate, where we focus, where we bring all our current abilities to bear. And it can be a good place. Like it's where we get paid. I mean, so we pay other people and people pay us to do our current best. And so it feels rewarding. We can feel confident in our performance zone. And we rightly try to minimize mistakes. But you don't get better by doing your best. You get better by going here, stretching yourself, challenging yourself to go just beyond your current best. And it's up here that we go, I'm not sure. And it's up here that we make mistakes. And it's up here that we lose confidence. It's up here that we feel like we're struggling. Beyond this is what we call our aspirational zone. And our aspirational zone is for the things that come later. But this is the learning zone. This is the part that Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development. Now, the reason I bring this up is because if we just talk about learning as learning, then students have no way of knowing what it should feel like here, here, or here. Down here in our comfort zone, it should be about completion and the words we use. And it's important to get these words. The words will be about task and activities and exercises and recaps. All those things that signal should be easy, straightforward, get it done, finish in time, all those sorts of ideas. Up here in our performance zone, it's more about performances, tests, showcases, assessments. And our performance zone demands different things. You can multitask in your comfort zone in the sense that you can mark the grade 3's homework while you're making dinner, watching television, having a conversation with your partner. Because you've got the resources to do it. It's not demanding. But you can't multi-perform. Multi-perform takes concentration, it takes focus, it takes all your current abilities. And so students need to be told in this space, it feels different to this space. And when we're in our learning zone, it's about problems and challenges, dilemmas, puzzles. And here it feels different again. And one of the key things that I want you to leave with today is a way of describing the difference between comfort, performance, and learning zones. And to be able to describe to students which zone they're going into, what behaviours, what expectations that are in each. And the job, of course, we're trying to do here is to raise the bar. That as students take on the challenge, the thing that makes them go, oh, I'm not sure about this. The space where the teacher said, we're going into our learning zone today. So if you don't make at least 5 mistakes in the next 10 minutes, you're not in your learning zone. Think about that. Whoops, sorry. I'm down here. Just dropped my clicker. Some of the schools I work with, when they talk about students going to their learning zone, they don't reward kids that get it right straight away. They reward kids for making mistakes, trying things out, having to ask questions. And they actually tell the students that are getting it right, that sounds like your performance zone. I wanted you in your learning zone today. That's a shame. You've lost 10 minutes of time you could have been growing. Because when you're in your learning zone, what ends up happening is you raise the bar. Your standards go up. You're not learning more, which is in the down here. Everything below the bar is one more thing to learn. Like if I was learning to knit, one more thing. But when you go into your learning zone, when you take on those challenges, you're doing better, not just doing more. One of the ways you can talk about this come Monday in your classroom. This happens at Glenview. It happens at a whole bunch of schools actually that I work with. But we talk about going into the zones and growth as if it's climbing a ladder. And so at Glenview, one of the early primary teachers, and we've got a case study for Glenview that I'll share with the follow-up email. But what the teacher does, they put the topic here and they say this topic, for most of the students in the room most of the time, we've got to be a bit flexible with this, is in your learning zone. And what they say to the students is as they work through it, as they struggle with it, because the point of it being in our learning zone is that you will struggle, you won't immediately know the answer. It's like climbing the ladder. Now the topic stays the same, the topic doesn't change, but what used to be hard has become easy. You've achieved growth. And by climbing that ladder, by going further up, notice how your comfort zone is getting bigger? Your world fills with easy things you haven't done yet. And importantly, those aspirations, those things that you're dreaming of, the things that you might want to achieve as an adult, the things you don't know how to do right now. When today's challenges become easier, yesterday's impossible comes into reach. And it's that sort of message that today's challenges don't stay challenges. They're challenges while we struggle, while we develop our habits of mind, while we get better. But they become easy. So many of our students think that if this is hard, this is going to be harder. This is going to be really hard. That will be impossible. And they look at that path and they go, I'm not doing that. I want to do the easy stuff. That's one of the reasons they avoid challenges. Because I think if this challenge is hard, the next challenge is going to be harder. If I struggled a little bit today, I'm going to struggle more tomorrow. Who would want to do that? And so one of the clear messages we need to give is that the struggle is temporary. We struggle, we grow, hard things become easy things. And we move on to the next thing, which is also hard. Not harder, just hard. And that's something that I find a lot of teachers don't fully grasp themselves. That as teachers, we think, year 11 is going to be really, really hard. It's not. If you've done the work to get to year 10, year 11 is hard. If you've done the work to get to year 11, year 12 is hard. If you've done that work, the first year of university is hard. It doesn't get harder and harder and harder. The struggle is always hard. Then you make the hard things easy. And one thing that's worth recognising is that our students are at different rungs of the ladder. It's a bit like this. At any given topic we might be giving a teaching in a day is in one student's learning zone, but another student's comfort zone. And in many of the schools that I work with, that idea becomes the basis for differentiation. One of the big problems we have with differentiation is that we tell students it's about their ability. And what that translates to is the smart kids, the average kids, and the other kids. And what often happens is that the kids that haven't climbed the ladder quite as far, they're given easy work, tasks, comfort zone to occupy their time. It's only the kids that have climbed further that are actually given challenges. And so the difference magnifies. In some of the schools that I work with, what the way the sort of cadence of the classroom works is that a teacher will say, you guys are going to be in your learning zone today because this is how far you've come. I'll be working with you. You can expect to struggle, expect to make mistakes. You guys have come a bit further, so you're going to be in your performance zone today. These are the tasks about consolidation. These are the tasks about checking your understanding. And you guys, starting something new, you'll be in your comfort zone, tuning in type activities, getting to know things, laying some foundations for future work. It's not smart kids or smart, I'm not even sure which group would be the smart group. It's about where you are in your journey and every student going into their learning zone. You know, one of the things that they say, just go back there, I'll show you that in a second. One of the things at Glenview, and again, I'll give you the case study for this, they said that when they look back at what they used to do, they used to look at all their data and they had kids that were achieving well, you know, at or above standard. And they had other kids that were a little bit below and some that were well below standard. And they realized that all their resources were going into the kids that were well below to try and get them up and the kids that were below to try to get them up. And these kids, the bulk of the kids that were at standard or a little bit above were, yeah, you're right, you just keep going with your work, you're fine. And the way Carl Allen talked about it, the principal there, he said most of his kids were doing well. And that wasn't their fault. And what he meant by that was that it wasn't the privilege of the kids that were below standard to be challenged and helped to grow. Every student had to be challenged to grow. And what's happened at Glenview is that, and this is something for you to think about really carefully, because Carl Allen put it like this. He said one of the biggest challenges for teachers in making learnership and challenge part of what they do in the classroom was to realise their job was not to support students. Their job was to challenge students. And a lot of teachers who love their kids, like we all get into the profession because we love your kids, like, you know, that's part of what we do. But for many teachers, that drive we have to nurture, to support, to scaffold, and actually robs kids of the opportunity for growth because we keep them out of their learning zone. Now, if you're looking for ways to start talking about this, one of the ways you can do it, this is one of the resources for those of you who've already downloaded the resources from the link Jane gave you earlier. This is in there. If you haven't, Jane will drop the link in again because I know that I'm watching the comments go past or shoom, flying through. So make sure you get a copy of these resources, because having this poster in your classroom, talking to kids about which zone they're in, you know, this is the core of it all. And one of the things teachers new to this work often ask me, said, how do I teach this to my students? You don't. You don't have to make a lesson out of it. You can stick this on the wall, and then the strategy for you is simply notice and name. Notice it. When you see a kid in their learning zone, say, that That's your learning zone. That's it. This is what we're talking about. When I say learning zone, it looks like that. And when you see a kid with their feet up, just going, this is easy, this is easy, this is easy. So that's your comfort zone. That's this one. And when you see a kid that doesn't want to make a mistake and is getting everything exactly right and doing their best, but not wanting to go further, that's their performance zone. And when a student says, oh, I'd love to do this one day, that's their aspirational zone. That's all you need to start this conversation, to start students going, so that's why that's easy. It's in my comfort zone. And that's why I find this so hard. It's in my learning zone. When they get those ideas, you can start talking about climbing the ladder. What I'd love to see in the chat box right now, and I'd love to see it in English, but that's okay. If you can't do it in English, that's fine. Where do you see your kids right now? Where do your kids tend to go to most of the time? Do they like spending their time in their comfort zone, their performance zone, their learning zone, or are they the kids going, oh, I just want to try the really, 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 really hard stuff? What's in there? Comfort, comfort, comfort. Comfort, comfort, comfort. Oh, goodness. I'm just going to have a sip of a drink while I watch the comfort. Oh, goodness. Oh, mostly comfort, comfort.
And James, while you're having a little sip, let me know when you're ready for some questions, because we've got a few coming through.
Cool. I think there's something wrong with the chat box, though, because it seems like the only word people can put in is comfort. I see one different. Was that? I went past too quick. But we're right. Most of our kids go to their comfort zone. They're creatures of comfort. They go to their comfort zone habitually because that's where their least effort goes in. That's where they get an immediate return. That's where they feel like they're being successful. Jane, what are some of the questions that have come through?
Okie dokie. Just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm going to try and do some of this in order. And thanks to Editora for translating some of them for me. So what we've got, and there are quite a few coming through. One of our guests has said, I do not agree with you. In my opinion, when I keep repeating the same lesson on repeat, at some point I get new information about that subject. I get interested and I search for more. I will grow, and so are my students. So somebody's just having a little bit of a differing opinion.
Okay.
Another guest has said, in my classroom work, I often notice that students shy away from new tasks for fear of making mistakes. Now, I know you said that earlier. My question for our guest is, and this is editor talking to me, can you give us an example of verbal feedback that encourages students to step outside of their comfort zone, focusing not on the outcome, but on the effort they put into trying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where I'm going. That what I want to talk about now is how do we help students understand those zones of learning? All right, once you've got this concept as an educator, that we've got different zones that have different outcomes, different feelings, different ways of working, how do we help students do it? Which addresses the first part of the question, like how do we get kids in there? One of the schools that I work with, or several, do different versions of this, they display this poster, but the important thing is not the kids, intellectually understand this, but they know how it feels. The real test of knowing what zone you're in is about how it feels. And this particular school I'm thinking of, what they've done is they put this poster up and they said, that's how your comfort zone feels. Then it's easy, straightforward, no struggle. Like a sunny day, reclining on the chair. Performance zone, yeah, I like that. Like it feels good, you feel confident, you feel energetic. Your learning zone feels more like that. Now, one of the schools that I work with in Queensland here in Australia, what they've done, again, to help students get to know that there's different feelings, different emotions, different behaviours, different outcomes associated with each of these, is that they've got the kids to make up little triangle bits of paper with comfort zone, performance zone, learning zone written on them. And what they do then is that the kids start working, and the teacher says, now tell me what zone you think you're working in at the moment. And the students turn them over so they can say, I'm in my learning zone right now, which is a way of saying, I'm going to need some help today. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm struggling. Or I'm in my performance zone. I'm consolidating here. I'm getting things right. Or this is easy for me. I'm in my comfort zone. And so the language of being a learner, and this is really critical for those of you that are in secondary schools, where we often sort of, teach language, we teach art, we teach music, we teach history, we teach maths, we teach science. I went through a secondary school last week. Every classroom looked different because they taught maths, they taught language, they taught art. Where was the learning process? And what this work does, when we start talking about the types of behaviours, what we need to do and how it feels in each one, levels it across the different subjects. This is how we go about the learning process. I'm not sure if you get Ted Lasso or not in Romania. I'm guessing you do. But I love this quote. Telling kids, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. And what they're saying, what Ted Lasso's saying there, is that struggle, that discomfort, that not knowing, that making mistakes is normal, is expected. And this is the key. Remember, our kids come into classrooms thinking, learning's learning. And they wonder, why is that hard? I don't want to do that learning if it's hard. They think that struggle, that the mistakes they're making are a measure of them. It judges them. And the lesson, if we're going to develop a relationship with challenge, the lesson we need to teach them is that struggle is normal. Now, just go with me on this. How many of you can imagine this going on in your classroom? You've got one student here and you go, great work you're doing today. You're trying really hard. You're putting a lot of effort into this work. Here's some feedback for you. Here's a way to fix that. Keep working on it. You'll get there. Now, I think we can all relate to that. Like the student that's working hard, struggling, working through a problem, we're actually really proud of them. We can keep it. That's great to see you doing the hard work. But if you do this next, well done, Michelle. That's exactly right. Congratulations. On to the next task. You do that. You've just told both students that the struggle makes up for the deficit. What you really value is the immediate, straight answer, effortless work being done here. And this is why kids shy away from the struggle. They're learning that struggle is a sign of weakness, a sign of deficit, a sign of they're not good enough. Because we unconsciously, you encourage it, yes, but we encourage it as the consolation prize. Because what we really value is they're done well. Because eventually this student gets it and we go, gee, you've done that well today, congratulations. And we're really happy with the done well part. Why wouldn't we do this? Working really hard on this, that's great to see the effort. This is going to produce the growth. You know that feeling you're having right now? That struggle? That's the feeling you have just before you grow. That's awesome. Keep up the hard work. You're really in your learning zone. That's going to count. Right? Same sort of thing, slightly different language. Turn to this student and go, what the hell have you been doing with your time for the last 15 minutes? You've got everything right. You've flown through those tasks. Now, I'm not very nice. The way you would actually say this, so the message I'm trying to give them is I actually want them to be struggling. I'm not going to reward the fast, easy, quick, you do it. What I'm rewarding is the struggle, is the work putting into growth. So you could either say, like I am, you've wasted your last 15 minutes, you could have been growing and you haven't been, or you could say this, wow, that work you did last week has really paid off today. All that struggle like this made this work easy today. Now, I love seeing it when you can do it easy, but I was hoping to spend these last 15 minutes growing, not showing me what you could do. So can you go on to the next exercise? Because I want to see you doing more of this. This is the way we normalize and help kids understand the learning zone, what it's for. And so the sort of messages we need to give kids to get to know their learning zone, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, is that we want them to understand, and we say this, that it feels like not immediately knowing the answer. When you go, you're teaching them to go, I'm in my learning zone. When I'm in my learning zone, I've got to reach for my problem-solving superpowers. I've got to expect to make mistakes. I've got to, those sort of ideas. Different behavior. It's normal. It should feel like stretch, not strain. Strain, like treading water, not drowning. It should be 7 out of 10 uncomfortable. Not really, really hard. Just that little bit of stretch is what we're looking for. And importantly, it should be beyond your current abilities. Not an easy thing you haven't done yet, but beyond your current abilities. Means you have to work on on how you are learning, not just what you are learning. And importantly, like I was saying before, it's not hard, harder, really hard. Those feelings pass. All that struggle you did last week really paid off. You're not struggling with that anymore. The struggle you're engaged in right now, that's the edge of growth. That's the growing pains of getting better. You're about to grow. I love to see that. Those sort of ideas. Because if we want to help students maximize their growth, then the best way to do that, best way to accelerate growth, is to embrace, seek, and amplify that discomfort. To recognize that discomfort is a normal part of the process. Now, some of you are going, yeah, of course, of course, of course. Many of you at one level or another is going, really? I don't like the discomfort. Because we've all got our own relationship with challenge. But in order to grow, instead of being creatures of comfort, we need to become creatures of discomfort. To learn to lean into the challenge, to want it to be hard. To want it to be hard. Who wants it to be hard? Many of you and many of your students, if you said in there, challenge is a good thing, it's good to want to struggle, people should go and find challenges, and they're going to go, you're nuts. Like, no one feels like that. Some people do. And this is where we talk about the relationship. Now, what I want you to do, get your fingers ready. I'm going to get you to doing something in the chat box here. But if I do this, here we go. And I wonder, actually, if I do this, this is not going to show up. But here we go. Let's imagine this is a dial, okay? It is a dial. You're not going to be able to move it. But imagine if challenge was a person, a new student in your class. Right? Think about this for a minute. Personify the idea of challenge. Now, if challenge came into your classroom tomorrow and sat down, how would the other students treat them? How would the other students treat challenge? Would it be, dead set enemies? They're not going to be in my classroom. Would they be, oh, okay, I'm okay with them. They, we get along. Be a classmate, a friend, or their best friend? Just in the chat box, I'm absolutely stunned that some people are putting 9s and 10s, lots of 9s and 10s and 8s. Lots and lots of them. That's, I have never, ever seen that response before. Never, ever. So you're saying if challenge was a student, kids would rush up to them and give them a big hug, want to spend the day with them. Okay, I am amazed. I'd love for, if anyone wants to elaborate on that, I would love to know more about it. I'll tell you something that happened to me recently, that I was in a secondary school and I asked the year 11 and 12s this question, the 16, 17-year-olds, if challenge was a person, how would you treat them? And they all talked in their groups for a little while. And what they said was they'd be the student that no one spoke to, left on their own. No one wants the challenge. And then one of their prefects, one of their school leaders, stood up and said, come on, girls, be honest. That would be the student who's being bullied so they wouldn't come back to school. So I find the 10 pluses that just came through, the 9s, the 7s, extraordinary. I want to talk about the relationship we have with challenge and whether we avoid it, endure it, accept it, use it, or seek it. Now, I bring this up, and I might skip through, given the number of 9s and 10s coming through. I may not need to do some of the next section, but have a listen to the way that Michael Caine here talks about his relationship with challenge. I'll bring this up.
And finally, I came across a line which I just wanted you to sort of explain to me. You said that if you did have one philosophy of life, it was use the difficulty.
Yes, use the difficulty.
What does that mean?
Well, yeah, I got it from I was rehearsing a play when I was a very young actor, and I had to come in this scene. It was a stage play. I'm behind the flats, waiting to open the door. There was an improvised scene between a husband and wife going on inside, and then they got carried away and they started throwing things, and he threw a chair, and it lodged in the doorway, and I went to open the door, and I just got my head round, and I said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't get in." He said, "What do you mean?" There's a chair there. He said to me, "Use the difficulty." What do you mean? He said, "Well, if it's a comedy, fall over it. If it's a drama, pick it up and smash it." I said, "Use the difficulty." Now, I took that into my own life. You ask my children, they said, anything bad happens, they go, "Got to use the difficulty. How can we work? What can we get out of this? Use the difficulty." And so there's never anything so bad that you cannot use that difficulty. If you can use it 0.25% to your advantage, you're ahead. You didn't let it get you down. That's my philosophy. Use the difficulty. Also, added philosophy is avoid them if you can.
Now, Michael Caine's philosophy there is to use it, to use the difficulty, if it comes up, make the most of it. But he's not out there seeking it. And I'm watching these 10s go past again. It's sort of become a little bit of a theme, 10, 10, 10, 10. The question that comes to my mind is that if your kids love challenges, if your kids are coming up to you asking all the time, "Can I have something harder, please?" If your kids are never worried about making mistakes, if they're always looking at how do I achieve more growth, if they're saying, "Make it harder for me," why did you enroll for the workshop? Yeah, I'm really curious because I have never, ever had a group say 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 like this. So I'm really curious if anyone's got some insights about what's going on there. But we'll keep moving forward because the purpose of today's workshop is how to build that relationship with challenge. If your students already have that relationship with challenge, then we need to move on to the next workshop, which would be other bits and pieces around effort, around habits of mind, problem solving, superpowers, and so forth. What I want you to think about in this context is this, is when we talk about challenge, how does that relationship change? And I bring it up because when we think about challenge, most of us have our own relationship with it. We're not talking about just doing things in class, tasks, easy stuff. We're thinking about the things that make you go, how do you relate to that? How do you relate to your learning zone? And most of us have a relationship. We understand what our relationship is, and sometimes it's hard to see other people have a different relationship. For some people, they avoid a challenge, and they avoid it because they see challenge as a sign of limitation, a sign of them saying, I can't do it. If I fail at something, it shows up my deficits. The belief is that if it's hard, it means I'm not good at something. Whereas someone at the other end of the scale means if it's hard, that's where I grow. And so very different points of view. Given a strong tens before, I'll go through this. Here, the focus for these students where it's avoidance is about feeling safe. I don't want to do a challenge because it makes me feel unsafe. I'll do the tasks, I'll do the easy things, I'll stay busy where I feel safe. I know the answers, I know I can do it. But I won't do the hard things because I might be wrong. And the shift we need to make here, the reframe that we need here, is that the challenge is the pathway to growth. It's not a barrier that shows your limitations. It's the direction we take to grow. And the next step in that is to say, struggle is a sign of growth. Like I was saying before to my imaginary student here, you're feeling like you're struggling? That shows me you're about to grow. That's the way to talk about it. As we move on, the next sort of level of relationship here is that some kids endure it. And this is interesting. I want you to think about how you talk about challenge in the classroom. Do you talk about it as a friend? Or do you talk about it as something to be endured? Because I was talking to a teacher recently who said, after I'd sort of worked through these ideas, he said, I've just realized every time I talk about challenge in my classroom, I apologize. I say, I'm sorry, kids, this is going to be hard. I'll help you through it. And with a bit of luck, we'll get through it by the end of the lesson, and then we can do something fun instead. But a lot of teachers resonated with that. They realized that when they talked about challenge, they talked down to challenge. So we just got to get through it. Keep at it, you'll get there. In this sort of struggle, push through it, endure type attitude that we're teaching kids. And the belief here is that it's something to, push through, but not value. It's just something that's got to be done, a chore. As a result, they tend to be very reluctant to take on challenges. You've got to coax them in there. You've got to reward them. You've got to promise them something at the end. And the focus is getting through it. And so kids will constantly come up to you and say, am I finished? Is this enough? Can I stop now? It's those sort of questions that some of you will be able to relate to. The reframe that we need here is that challenge builds abilities. A lot of kids, when they sort of, do I have to get through it? They're focused on the task, getting through the challenge, or am I finished? Am I finished? But the shift we need to create is one where we say to students, this challenge changes you. It builds abilities in you. And not just abilities in the maths that you're learning or the language that you're learning, but builds abilities for you to grow, build your problem-solving superpowers. And so again, we need to take that next step so that students can start to build a relationship where it's no longer enduring and it's more about accepting. All right, well, I'm doing this for a reason. The reason may sometimes be the task itself, but it's a part of the learning process. And I'm trying to learn something here. I'm trying to reach a goal. And so the challenge is there to help me improve. If I don't do the hard stuff, I'm never going to get better. So there's a more accepting nature to it. These sort of scores, if this resonates with you, I would have expected you to have scored 4s and 5s, maybe 6s earlier on. The focus here is on achieving the goal, achieving the end point. The reframe that's needed is challenge must help us grow. And the next step in that is to start managing challenge. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about. How do we calibrate our challenges? Like Michael Caine, some people use it. They don't seek it, but when it happens, right, what can we do about that? It's not a judgment on them, but it's an opportunity to grow. And that's where difficulty becomes part of the process of what we're doing. We're not looking for it, but it helps us get there. The focus becomes about growth, not ease. All right, so like Michael Caine did it. He said, if there's a chair there, all right, well, don't find the easy path. Go through the challenge, use it as an opportunity. The mayor here in Melbourne, just after COVID sort of cleared up, not cleared up at all, but just after that, was being interviewed, and she said, COVID was one of the best things to happen to business in Melbourne. Now, she got hammered for that. No one wanted to hear that message because it had been such a struggle for everybody. But what she meant was that it presented a challenge that when people used it properly, actually helped them grow, that most people just cruised along, business as usual. But those who used the challenge of COVID grew as a result. But the reframe we want here is to make hard things easy. Challenges aren't just there to be overcome, they're there to be leveraged. They're there to help us push forward and make those hard things easy. But we want to go one step or even two steps further. Where we want to take students is that they seek it out. Like the kids I was talking about before at Taradale Intermediate, where they actually say, this is not hard enough for me. I need more. I need further. The belief is that difficulty is where the learning happens. That's where I'm going to grow. The behaviours is to choose the harder tasks. You know, these are the students that when you give them 10 questions to answer, will skip the first 6 because they're too easy and then stick their teeth into 7, 8, 9 and 10. How many of your students do that? Where we want to take them though is that the reframe here is that it's not about now, it's about the future. That the challenge isn't just here to help you right now, it's here to set you up for the future. And that's where we get the person who becomes what I call anti-fragile. And I talk about that in the book. That this person embraces, I thought it was embraces, leverages a channel, but leverages, embraces it so it becomes something they want to do. You know, in the spirit of JFK, we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. They're looking to accelerate their growth because every challenge helps them build their problem-solving superpowers, their habits of mind. That's where they're trying to build. How many of your students sound like this? That they're trying not just to develop mastery and adaptability, but they're trying to go to that next step where they say, this is something to future-proof me. This is something that's building in me abilities that will set me up for the future. This is raising the bar and filling the world with easy things I haven't done yet. Oops, I should have gone that way. All right. One of the things I've got for you to help with this, I promised you earlier on that there'll be a bunch of infographics. And if you've downloaded the resources, Jane might drop that link in again if you haven't already seen it, if it went past too quick or you jumped in too early. One of the resources I've got for you is a way to help identify what your student's relationship with challenge is and what you can do to help nurture a more growth-orientated version. And this is the way to do it. That infographic, and I know it'll be too small for most of you to read on your screens, but it gives you a bit of a guide about what you can do to help improve students' relationships with challenge. All right. So what I'd love to see in the chat box, one thing, what's been the most important lesson so far? that you've taken away from this session so far, as I'm just going to skip a couple of slides to keep us in time. Get us to there, to here. That's where I want to be. And I wonder if Jane and the team are quick enough to see this as it goes through. I would love for someone to ask a question, or maybe Jane, there's been one that's come up already, about how to reword the way they talk about challenge, or how to respond to a student who says, what about this or what about that? What are those questions that ask for, how do I say this in the classroom? Is there anyone got a question about that?
There have been a lot exactly like that, actually, James.
Beautiful. Give us a
yeah. I'm really honing in on one, and I know we won't be able to get to all of the questions, but there's one here with a guest saying, what should we do with those students whose parents do not help them throughout their learning process? It is not enough to be there for your students and helping them if they go home to a totally different environment. I strongly believe that growing doesn't happen only in the classroom, it should happen at home too. Here in Romania, we struggle with parents and with their incapacity of understanding that we should be a team. Yeah, here in Australia too.
It's not unique. I'll answer that in two ways. First off, just quickly confirm for me, do Romanian parents love their children? I'm going to assume yes. Okay, we all love our kids, but that's important to recognise. When parents say, don't worry, sweetheart, that's too hard, try something easier, they're doing it out of love. All right, they're doing it out of a sense of, I don't want you to struggle because I believe that struggle is a sign of weakness, and what I want you to do is have a life that's easy, a life that's successful. And so a lot of the work that I do is with schools and with parents to help them understand that the struggle is the growth. In fact, I've got a new book coming out later this year called The Learning Advantage, and it's written for parents for exactly that purpose. But let's use this question in a slightly different way. You're going to go away from today in 40 minutes or so with lots of questions, I've got new ideas, but how do I? And I've got some suggestions for you, some offers for you to continue this learning down the track. But one of the tools that are in that offer is this. So I'm looking at this camera now, and I've just got to pull up the right window here. Now, what I have created for exactly this sort of problem, or this sort of question, is this custom GPT. Now, this custom GPT is a resource that I provide to the schools that I partner with and to people who do my courses. What I want to demonstrate here is just really quickly, what I've taught it is all my IP. So I can ask it questions like, I have parents that think struggle is a sign of deficit, correctly? They undermine students' confidence. How can I work with them to help them understand the importance of challenge? Now, we might spend a little bit of time coming up with a better question, but that's a pretty good one. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to run off and look at my brain. The point is here, what it's done is it said, parents often interpret struggle through a performance lens. All right, so they're thinking about it's meant to be easy and done well. They don't see the development of what struggle's about. So it's given you three options. Reframe struggle as the location of learning, help parents see the backstory of success, which is something I talk about in my book a lot, and move parents from protectors of comfort to coaches of growth. And you might look at that and go, oh, that one sounds really interesting. And you'd say, tell me more about this. and it would explain it to you, and it would give you suggestions about what to say. Here you go. There's a few examples of what you might say, and on it goes, on it goes, on it goes. Now, I don't want to spend, I'll stand up here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because not everyone will have access to it. The point I'm trying to make here is that there are now tools available to you that when you work with these ideas, go, there's the suggestion, there's the answer, there's the way of working with this. That GPT that I've trained in my IP gets it right, I reckon, 80% of the time. And when it doesn't get it right, you go, yeah, that doesn't sound right. And you just ignore it and you move on to the next part. Really very, very powerful, and a tool that I'll show you how to get access to in just a little bit. So that's what I call, that's what I call transformed. I'll go back to there, to transform education. Now, how are we going for time? I'm going to just jump over a couple of slides here. A couple of the other resources that are in your resource pack that many of you have downloaded by now. One of them, the schools that I work with often put up displays about the learning process and about what challenge is all about. One of them that has sort of resonated really strongly with a few teachers, or many teachers that I work with, is this sort of idea. It's more appropriate for the early learning classrooms, so early primary, middle primary, but it talks to that idea of making challenge your friend. In the Learning Advantage, my new book, or one of my new books coming out this year, we talk about how some of the children in the story make challenge their friend. They talk about a character, Charlie Challenge, and how Charlie Challenge helps them. And in one of the resources that you've got in that resource pack that I've given you, it gives you language to talk about challenge as a personification. You know, you say things like, you know, challenge is here to help you grow. And, you know, this looks really hard. Should we invite challenge to help us here? And what it does, particularly for those young kids, is it softens the idea of challenge. It makes it not a threat, not something to judge you, but it makes it an inviting thing, something that's meant to be around, something that you make friends with. I think if you listen to the way we often talk about challenge, how you hear parents talk about challenge, how challenge is talked about in the media, even in books that students are reading and things like that, it's often presented as that endure, tolerate sort of thing, like, oh, this is going to be hard, we'll have to get through it. And so students are coming into classroom and saying, we're doing something hard, and they go, oh, do I have to get through it? But if we adopt this sort of language, it becomes a much more positive experience. That's the same one. The resource that's in there also talks about the some of the language you can use. And this particular resource that's in the resource pack gives you some of that language for 13 to 17-year-olds. You know, those teenagers that aren't going to buy the, you know, challenge is your friend thing. But it reframes those ideas into language you can use. Now, all of those, pretty much all of them, were generated by the transformed AI tool that I just showed you. And one of the ways a lot of schools are using it is to take the phrases that they sort of go, yeah, I like that one, but I wouldn't quite say it, dropping it into transformed and saying, give me 10 other ways to say this. And out it comes. So there's some really powerful ways of doing that. One of the other strategies in there to help you apply this work, and if you've downloaded this already, you know, which ones of these resonate with you? Some of the things that you can stick in the staff room. This is not for the classroom, it's more for the staff room. About things to say. One of the things, I'll just take that off for a second. I hate putting words in your mouth. I hate catchphrases that you go and say. I've got a few that I like, but as a rule, I try not to say this to students, because you've got to say it your way. You've got to say it through your backstory, through your history, through your examples, through your tone of voice and all the rest of it. And so with these examples where I give you things to use these phrases, I don't actually expect you to use the phrases. What I expect you to do is to look at the phrases and go, so I need to say it more like, and then adapt it to your way of doing it. Pull out the key ideas there and communicate that rather than swallowing my words. Now, we've got time to do this part. Good. One of the things we've been sort of dancing around, and a foundational part of this book, is students' mindsets. And that's what I want to talk about now, because, let's go back to here. Your mindset is your default setting for learning. I mean, fundamentally, this is Carol Dweck's work, and we made a lot of mistakes when we first did Carol Dweck's work in schools. We all said not yet and celebrated effort, and kids went, and nothing really happened. Because what we did wrong is we taught mindset. We taught it like it was a topic. You shouldn't have done that. Most people, when they did mindsets, they basically said, this is fixed, this is growth, do that. Don't say you can't, say you can't yet. And then not yet turned into still not yet. And praising effort turned into praise struggling students for effort. And it didn't actually make a big impact. And Carol Dweck said it, probably 5 years ago now, it's been a while, where she said, the importance of mindset was really clear. What we didn't understand was the challenges of implementation. And that was the struggle we had. The struggle we had was that we taught about it rather than for it. And the key to that was to recognize that we didn't have fixed mindsets and didn't have growth mindsets. What we had was better described as a continuum. And this is downloadable from my website. You can jump on there and download it. It's for free. But once we realized that we didn't have fixed mindsets, we didn't have growth mindsets, our job wasn't to instill or install or ask students to adopt a growth mindset, that we weren't meant to come into classrooms and say, come on, have a growth mindset. It doesn't work like that. Our mindsets are some of our most deeply held beliefs about ourselves, and they drive our day-to-day decisions. And what we need to do in our schools is to nudge, nurture, nourish an increasingly growth-oriented mindset in our students, to bring them across, not by telling them, but by teaching them how to change. That basically someone with a fixed mindset doesn't get learning. Someone with a fixed mindset thinks learning is about discovering what their abilities are. They come to school and they ask, do you think I'll be good at this? Someone with a growth mindset, on the other hand, thinks or understands learning is about creating their abilities. That learning is about becoming someone you didn't used to be. And in that difference, this is me, get used to it, this is me today, I can grow and learn, is learnership. The person with a growth mindset says, if I can change, I want to know how to do it. And so one of the things we can do to help students develop a more growth-orientated mindset is to teach them how to learn, to teach them to recognize their growth. And the messages that we surround them with then every day, every lesson, become really important. Not the growth mindset lesson, but the lesson around how to grow. And so what we've created, or what I've created to help you do that, is a series of what I call nudges. Nudges are little reminders that tell us something about the learning process, that tell us something about how we go about learning and how we change. And so, like I was saying a moment ago, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I want you to give you little nudges, little rules that say, say more of this and less of that. And so I want to quickly go through 4 or 5 of these nudges. And the first one is the idea is challenge is a pathway to growth. Whenever we talk about challenge, like we've been doing all evening, all morning, challenge is where we grow. And so when we talk about challenge, it's always about, this is about getting better. This is about how we improve. This is, when you're struggling, when you take on the hard things, they're the things that help us grow. It's like Muhammad Ali. You might know a famous quote by Muhammad Ali. And someone asked him one day, how many sit-ups do you do each day? And he said, don't know. I don't start counting until they hurt. And what he was saying was that the easy stuff doesn't count. The easy stuff doesn't count. What counts is the stuff that is hard. Muhammad Ali, unlike Michael Caine before, who used the difficulty, Muhammad Ali embraced it. That's where I get better. So it doesn't count until then. And you can translate that into your own classroom. When you look at what's going on in your classroom in the day, how much of that is challenge and how much of that is easy? How much of it is task and how much of it is problem? Because I wonder about all those 10s before and how it conflicts with what I've been told, and I've experienced with teachers in Romania about kids that don't want to make mistakes, about kids that want the path of least resistance, about kids that don't want to take on challenges, the reason you came to today's workshop. And I wonder if some of those 9s and 10s were kids love doing things. They love the tasks and activities. They love being busy. They love the enjoyable stuff. But they're avoiding the actual challenging stuff. A challenge isn't a task. It's not an activity. It's something that makes you go, I don't know how to do this. That's what it's about. One of the other nudges to remember is that we should stretch, not strain. Our learning zone is that little bit beyond our current best. It's not way beyond our current best. Sometimes we say to kids, push as hard as you can. Don't push as hard as you can. Don't go to the hardest task. Carl Allen at Glenview was talking about that. He said, before they started realizing that every student needed to be challenged, appropriately challenged, calibrated their challenge, that the teachers sort of said, this is what we're teaching. And some kids were here and they were way out of their depth all day. And his language was, it's like we're asking the kids to do hill sprints every day. And no one likes doing that. It's exhausting. You can't do it. You can't sustain it. And so learning to calibrate your challenges. And one of the documents that we're not going to have time to really explore in detail tonight, but you've got it in the resources, is about zone calibration. Learning how to recognize which zone we're in, to move in and out of them at different times of the day. And this nudge is a reminder that it's our learning zone, that little bit beyond our current best, not way beyond our current best, that we need to be working in. Make hard things easy. I'm going to give you a couple of, I said I don't like putting words in your mouth. The next 2 slides are words I want to put in your mouth. The number of kids who think that it goes, and adults as well, that think it goes hard, harder, really hard, impossible. I meet teachers who are, finding their middle leadership role really hard and can't imagine how they'd ever be a principal. Because they think that if this job is hard, being a principal must be like, ugh. But the truth is, every principal was a middle leader who struggled and made it easy. And then they took the next step where they struggled and made it easy. And then they, don't get me wrong, jobs can be difficult because of the volume of work and things like that. But the decision making, the problem solving doesn't get harder and harder and harder. It's hard, easy, hard, easy. And when your kids see someone that's just making it look effortless, whether that's someone in the media or the person sitting next to them. The phrase to remember is that it takes a lot of effort to make something look effortless. And the back pocket phrase I want you to keep in your language kit to take into the classroom is that easy is earned. Easy is earned. My two kids before. You're working through that. You're about to grow. That's great. That easy was earned last week. Well done. It's not easy for you. Easy is earned. Easy is something that comes as a result of the effort. But very often we forget to say that. We celebrate the achievement, but we don't celebrate what went into it. And very often when we celebrate what went into it, we do it as a consolation prize. We say, congratulations, look at the great work. And you worked really hard too. Every time you celebrate an achievement, celebrate it in light of what it took to get there, which is this next one. This idea of closing the greatness gap. That when we look at people that have struggled and gone through the challenge and gone through the growth, we often look at their highlight reel. We look at their achievements, their top peak performance. And what we need to do is actually look at their journey. Because when you talk to people at the top of their game, people who have achieved enormous things, they know the achievement is a reflection of everything they've done. I sometimes talk about someone standing on top of Mount Everest. They wouldn't say that was the achievement. Standing on top of Everest isn't the achievement. They don't call themselves a mountain stander on top of her. They call themselves a mountain climber. And so that's the backstory, which is the next big nudge here, that all the value is in the backstory. Now, I'm going to say something here that's going to upset a few people, but the standard that your kids are at, it's terrible. Terrible. Compared to where they're going to get to as high achieving adults. And so while this might be their current best performance, their peak standard, the best they've ever done, there's going to be a point in their future where they look back and go, I'm so much better now. And so the value is not in this achievement. It's not in this standard. The value is in what it took to get there. One of the strategies that I encourage you to use is that whenever someone achieves something significant, I want you to look back and look at the backstory. What did it take to get there? And then look forward. Look to that next place that you're one step closer to. What's in reach now that didn't used to be in reach. And that's another thing. We were talking about parents before. And Jane, I'll pull up some questions in a minute too if you want to get a few queued up. Sometimes parents, particularly of younger kids, put work up on the fridge or up on the notice board at home, that sort of thing. Send home 3 frames for your parents to put on the wall. And whenever their child brings back that piece of work, the thing they're celebrating, the thing they're proud of, put it in the middle frame. And then in the frame to the left, put their earlier work to show them where they've come from. This is what used to be your best. Now this is your best. Look how far you've come. It's not, you're better now. You've grown. Your work has gone from here to here. And the third frame is for the future. It can have a question mark in it, or it can have a description of what you're aiming for, whatever you like. But what you're trying to do is put the through line. Because the last one I want to talk about here is that we often talk about potential. Students' potential. Potential is something you create, not something you find. It's something you build, not something you reach. Anders Ericsson, one of the authors that I draw on a lot, one of the researchers I draw on a lot, put it this way. Actually, I said that one. your potential is not something to be unlocked, it's something to be cultivated. And the resource, this is one that I've missed. So if you've downloaded the resources already, you'll get a follow-up with this one in it. But this is, again, one of the infographics that I think you can use to help you understand and apply this idea of using nudges to move students along the mindset continuum. And in doing that, as you move students along that continuum, you help them understand themselves as learners. What's happening along the way is they're building that relationship with challenge. Once you understand yourself as a learner, you understand that challenge drives the growth. That it's there that you build your superpowers. It's there that things move forward. You don't spend your time getting busy. You spend your time getting better. Jane, before I start wrapping up, what are some of the questions that have been coming up?
Yeah, thanks, James, and apologies to everyone. We're not going to get to all of the questions.
No,
I've got
I'm hoping that there's some themes that might have come through.
Yeah. Some of the themes that are coming through are around ages, different ages, and how we can, students with low self-esteem, how can we help them along? Sorry, I'm just going to go back to that one. Let's see if I can find it. Is it beneficial to expose them to simple tasks so that they can experience a sense of competence? Does this keep them within their comfort zone, or should it be viewed as a transitional stage before gradually inviting them into more challenging situations?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because it's something we often do. We give kids easy tasks to try and build confidence. And that's okay, as long as we are explaining that these are comfort zone tasks. These are tasks that you're meant to find easy. They're meant to get straight away. You probably won't make any mistakes, because getting momentum up, getting some early success and going, I can do it, can all be new. Remember, it can be a new thing that's in your comfort zone. So you're still learning something. You're still getting the breadth type work done. But it's important that if you just go, look, here's some things to get going. Shh, it's a secret. They're in your comfort zone. And then you go easy, 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 hard. Like, you're setting them up to fail if you do that. If you say, look, we're building up some momentum here, we're covering off some new topics, we're in our comfort zone for a while, and they go, expect it, should be straightforward, should be straightforward. There's the time in your performance zone. Show me what your current best is. Okay. Now, and this is where you set them up to succeed. You say, now we're going into our learning zone. I don't expect it to be easy, right? This is where you're going to need to ask questions. You're not going to know the answer straight away like you did before. That's a part of the process. It's normal. It's not a sign of deficit. It's not a sign of limitation. It's where you're meant to be. We've gone from doing the breadth to focusing on the growth. And that change, that sort of awareness of this is meant to be easy and this is meant to feel like struggle. Here, the currency we deal in, I talk a lot about this now, the currency is time. Get it done, get it finished. Here, the currency is effort, effective effort. And it's different. In the performance zone, the currency is grades. And so I think it's worthwhile giving kids some warm-up activities, some new things to learn, some early success, but let them recognise that what they're doing here is not the same as what you're asking them to do in their learning zone. It's a different kind of learning. What else is there, Jane?
Can I ask two more in particular? Because I'm getting a bit of a theme here as well. Okay, this one here. Okay, I'm gonna go with the last one first. I've got this one. It's difficult to deal with the learning paradox and the perception gap students now have about their ability with their easy access to AI tools. Easy is earned with the AI as cognitive bridge. how do we deal with these newer challenges in communicating with the students about learnership and growth? AI keeps popping up.
Yeah. If you jump on my website, there's a series of blogs. I think you'll find it in the, what did I call that? Extended learning or learning stories or something like that. I can't remember what I called the section. But there's a section in there about AI. And what I'd say to you is, I mentioned a moment ago that the currency in the thing we trade in when we're in our comfort zone is time. Right? It's all about time. Like how fast can we do it? How quickly can we? Because it's not risky. It's not things that are going to struggle with. It's just getting them done. In our comfort zone, using AI is fine. I'm all for using AI to speed things up, to make things more efficient. In our performance zone, the currency is great, standards, getting things right, making it polished, getting those sort of ideas. And again, to a certain extent, I'm reasonably happy with using AI to tidy up my emails and to make sure that when my last book, when I wrote a chapter, I gave it to a couple of my AI tools and said, how does this, look? And they said, oh, this part looks good. This part could be improved. So thanks very much. And, it saved me time. I could draft really quickly. Where you have to be absolutely firm with your line is that you cannot let AI steal the effort that would lead to growth. When you're in your learning zone, that effort is changing you. When you're in your performance zone, that effort is going into the work. If you let AI do the hard stuff for you, it's like going to the gym and going, I'll just lift the light weights. Like, it's not going to do you any good at all. And the zone model helps you understand that. The zone model helps you recognize literally what you're doing in the learning zone is rewiring your brain, making things possible that weren't possible before. So when it comes to AI, if it's, doing the easy stuff, making things faster, doing the research, finding the information, all that sort of thing, great. If it's using it intelligently to help you with your performance, can you check this for me? Where do I need to improve? Great. But don't tell me the answer stuff. That's where that energy, that effort would otherwise go into your own growth. And I talk about that in that blog series that's on the website. So have a look at that when you're in there. 2 more things to do. And I know there was one more question. I'll try to get to it, Jane, but we'll see where we go here. One of the things that if you didn't put something like this in your classroom, I'm not sure how you could build learnership and build a relationship to challenge. We often talk about having learning expectations in our classroom. And often the learning expectations are exactly where we started this. Sit down, pay attention, follow my instructions. It's not learning expectations, it's behavioural expectations, which we need and they're important. But you need them to be taught, not to learn. And so we also need to establish in our classroom a set of learning expectations. And one of the resources, again, this one's on my website, I'll give it to you in the follow-up email, is something like this. Every school I work with, every classroom, after they've sort of talked about the zones, makes it clear that this is an expectation in the classroom, that when they're in their learning zone, you should expect to feel challenged. Oh, miss, this is too hard. Remember what we said? That's what we do in this classroom. We do hard things. It's not, let's see who finds this hard, let's see who finds it easy. You should expect to be challenged. You should expect to not immediately know the answer. You should expect to make mistakes. When we go into our learning zone, many of the teachers I work with will tell students, if you don't make 5 to 10 mistakes in the next 15 minutes, this is not hard enough for you. Put your hand up and I will come and give you something else to do. Because if you're getting it right straight away, then you're not in your learning zone. Expect learning to involve struggle because effort is the cost of growth. When I do workshops around effort, we talk about it as the currency of growth and ask if students are wasting it, spending it, or investing it. And we talk about how that's used as what drives you down that pathway of growth. And this part, we kind of do this in classrooms, but we've got to do this part. That's all normal, and it passes. So often we celebrate the end without saying the struggle got you there. Now, this is just the result of having done all the hard work. That feeling passes. Celebrate that. Then go back and do it all again. I've got a number of versions of this that we use in primary schools and in secondary schools. I think my next slide, the version I gave you before is very similar. It tells you what the learning zone is for. And that's a really important part of setting up a classroom where it's about the learner, not the learning. It's about the process you go through, what you do, how you expect to behave while you're engaged in that learning process. All righty, just going to jump down here. So there was a few things, just put this up thing. There's a few things that I gave you in the resource pack today that we haven't actually got to. And I know it's a Saturday morning for you, and I'm not going to ask you to stay for an extra half hour. But the resources speak for themselves. One in particular I want you to look at talks about zone calibration and asks you, how do you talk about learning's not learning? How do you get kids working with understanding the idea of the zones? Because if you want to nurture that more growth-orientated mindset and nurture that relationship students have with challenge, then the zone model, helping kids understand that learning's not learning, is critical. And there's that document talks about 5 different ways, strategies you can use tomorrow to talk about the zones in your classroom. From simply saying it, today I want you in your learning zone, to saying today you're going to struggle. You're not going to know what to do immediately. Which zone are you in? So to get kids to think about the feelings first and then label those feelings as a normal part of the learning process. Or today, I want you to do your best work, concentrate, get rid of mistakes. What zone's that? That's performance zone. And those kids that, the questions that I got over 100 questions, which I hope I've tried to address in themes throughout today. A lot of them said, kids didn't want to take on challenges, they felt anxious and things like that. Once they know that that's a normal part of this side of learning, this is a normal part of this type of learning, and mistakes belong here but not there, it explains the process. It helps you understand all of that. So that document's a really important one. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at it. But what I promised you at the start of today was this, that at the end of the session, where to go from here. And this session has been all about understanding challenge, how to build that relationship with challenge. And what I want to give you now, and Jane's going to drop a link into the chat for you. So she might drop it a couple of times because I can see it's going through, is an opportunity to extend your learning. That all the schools I work with sort of go, right, that's a great start, where to from here? And while today's 2 hours, it's only a limited amount of time, has sort of explored that idea of the zones, the next part of the learning is how to apply that in your classroom, how to use that language, how to apply the AI tool. And so if you go to community.jamesanderson.com.au/Romania, I've got a course there that I've put together especially for you guys. It's designed knowing we only had 2 hours this morning, and this was about enlightening you, about giving you new resources, giving you insights into what needs to be done. But there's more to the journey here. And so if you want more of that journey, this course is designed just for you. I've put access to the transformed AI tool in there, so you can get that immediate access to it. If you register for that course in the next week, you get access to the course and then access to AI, and then the course for about the next 3 months, I'm not going to take anyone's access away, but it'll take you, a little bit of time to get through it. In fact, one of the reasons that you won't get access to the course materials until next week is because I haven't quite finished. I was putting stuff into it and I thought, oh, they're going to want this, they're going to want that. And a bit like today, I've chopped out what turned out to be about an hour's worth of work because I wanted you to have it and we just ran out of time. So I've been putting all that stuff into the course, and some of the stuff I've missed out on today will go in there as well. We'll talk about the 6 different types of mistakes. We'll practice the language we use. You'll have the AI tool to go through and say, how do I say this? How do I address parents? Answer all those questions that we couldn't get to today. The cost of the course, I think, was $295, Ron. So it worked out, there was a price that seemed reasonable in Romania. But it's only there for a week. I'm not leaving this open forever. So if you're interested in that course, jump in. We'll send you an email to follow it up. But it will give you all those next steps that you need to translate what we started doing today into your classroom. So I invite you to have a look at that and jump into there as soon as you can. But we are very, very close to wrapping up. So,
Sorry, James. I just before we end everything, I know that Sebastian wants to address a couple of questions to you. Yes, please. Thank you.
So we can chuck over to Sebastian.
Thank you so much, first of all, for all the wonderful insight and inspiration. It truly was remarkable and innovating on how you touched on some very little exploited subjects and debunked some of the perceptions regarding teaching. Now, I do have something to ask on behalf of the ArtClad Publishing Trust. From our perspective, we are always asking ourselves how learning materials can truly support teachers in the classroom. So in your view, what kinds of resources of learning tasks best help teachers guide students into the learning zone, lead into the learning zone rather than keeping them in the comfort zone?
I hope the session today has answered that question throughout. It's not one strategy. It's an understanding of the role challenge has in driving growth, the ability to differentiate in our own minds to start with, and then in the minds of the students, where we are keeping them busy, where we're asking them to do their best, and where we're asking them to stretch, and to recognise that there's different purposes. Like, we legitimately have students in their comfort zone sometimes. We do breadth work. If you're in primary school and you're doing an integrated unit and you're doing the tuning in, finding out, sorting out, going further, taking action type model, the tuning in, just find out about stuff, that's all comfort zone. But then when you get to the test, doing your best, that's the performance zone. But where you're going further, that's where you're applying it, that's where you're stretching, that's learning zone. And one of the things about the levels of learnership is that as you become a more sophisticated learner, you change what you trade in, the currency that you use. You stop trading in time, you stop trading in grades, and you start trading in effort and growth. So that understanding communicated to students that I said up front, learning's not learning. That's the first thing we need them to understand if they're going to become skillful learners, to know the expectations and outcomes in those different zones, what they're for, and to be able to move between them. Then you know that, okay, this is how it's meant to feel now, this is what I'm achieving now. And that starts building that relationship with challenge. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll definitely be remembering all of this wonderful information. And Charlie Challenge, that one I truly remember.
Charlie Challenge is an absolute legend. He forms such a crucial part in the new book, The Learning Advantage. And he sort of popped up. Like, it was so much fun. I was writing this book and I was trying to work out, how do I have this little 6-year-old start taking on challenges, because she was starting to give up things. And friends have, little kids have imaginary friends. There we go. Charlie Challenge popped up. I've got in the back of my mind, a whole series of children's books about Charlie Challenge.
Thank you.
Cool.
I guess we could transition to other questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay and answer questions if people want to keep going. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous and a word that I think is probably thank you in Romanian. If someone can translate that M-U.
Yeah, that's thank you. And you're getting congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Remember, if you're interested in this course, such a great opportunity. I'd love to share it with you.
Alrighty. There was one, James, and I feel like it could segue into something interesting, which was the speed at which, with which the teachers have with their students, that they don't have a lot of time. One teacher here says it's maybe only 1 hour a week and only for 1 year in a certain class. She was saying that we have to follow some chapters, so time is important to stimulate them. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, habits of mind could be really fun.
Yeah, what I thought of when I heard that is, specialist teachers have 1 hour a week with students that often struggle with this sort of idea. I've got two answers to it. One is every bit helps. Like, sure, it'd be better if you had more time and everyone was on board, but everything you do can make a huge difference. And I've worked with teachers that for various reasons, the school's doing other things, but they come and work with me and they make real impacts in their own classrooms. So it can be done on your own, but it is obviously better if you do it as a school. And if there are schools out there that are listening to this going, oh, how do we get everyone on board? That's my passion. That's my core work. I mean, these workshops and webinars, it's fun and I love giving you the little bits. But what I really love doing is working with schools as a whole thing to change the culture of learning in the school. Because what we find is in most schools, we have a culture of what I call teaching and performance. We teach, then we measure their performance. And we shift that culture to be one of learning and growth, about the process we go through and how much growth we can achieve. And the teaching is still quality teaching and the performance still gets looked after. But we do it by creating learners, not just covering the learning. And schools like, and we'll send you the Glenview case study and the Asquith Girls case study and a few others that you can download them off the website too, that really show the impact you can have as a whole school. So if there are school leaders sitting out there tonight that want to talk about that whole school work, let me know. Or reach out. You've got I forgot to mention right at the top. We've got schools in Romania doing this work. Inspira in national school. I hope I've got that right, Claudia.
She's here saying hi to you as well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to introduce you at the beginning. Doing a fantastic job with their early primary kids, they're young little kids. So talk to Claudia and others as well. Anything else?
I've got something really interesting here, James. It's more of a comment. It's from Alexandru, saying, I don't know if you know this person, Hovarth, a neuroscientist who has worked with schools across 6 continents, opens with a stark claim: our children are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. This is not hyperbole dressed as provocation. For nearly the entire 20th century, IQ scores rose steadily. Each generation gained approximately 6 points over their parents, a phenomenon known as the Flynn effect. Starting around the year 2000, this trend reversed across much of the Western world. Crucially, in the countries where traditional schooling has remained largely intact, the decline has not occurred. What do you think about this? And then, as an extra, still encouraging AI in the class to help pupils.
Yeah, the Flynn effect's really interesting. There's a lot of research around why it is and whether it actually measures. My for a question at the end of the day, it's a very broad question asking for a lot. Look, we could have a long discussion here about the impact of technology on learning. We could have a long discussion about whether IQ actually measures something that's important or not, and I'm not entirely sure it measures something that's particularly important. To me, success is about the ability to do difficult things, to do things you couldn't do before, and IQ doesn't always measure that. What I am concerned about, though, is less about Flynn effects and measurable IQs and things like that, is that, you know, I talk about this in my book, and in the 1970s, 50 years ago, we talked about how the illiterate of the 21st century weren't going to be those who couldn't read and write. They were going to be those who couldn't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that was in light of the sort of burgeoning of the information age, that we've heard the statistics about the amount of information we're exposed to today compared to someone 100 years ago, and you know, all those sort of things. But that was 50 years ago. The information age is past. We're not in the information age anymore. We're in the age of disruption. You only have to look at the newspapers this week to realize how rapidly change and the nature of change, it's not just that there's more information that we need to absorb. The nature of change is that change is the only constant and uncertainty is the only certainty. And in that environment, we don't just need people who can learn and find out new things. We need people who can grow. We need people who can actually lean into challenges and become what I call anti-fragile. It's a term Nicholas Taleb uses, that we often talk about resilience and how we've got to have kids that can bounce back after disturbances. That's reactive, and it's setting the bar too low. We need people who lean into those challenges and leverage them for their opportunity to grow. And so whether or not technology and declining IQ, I don't care. As long as we're becoming better learners, the sort of people who can embrace challenges rather than run away from them. That, as with the introduction, this might be a good way to bring things right round to the full circle. We want people who have agency. It's what I talk about in the first few chapters of the book. People who are masters of their circumstances, not the victim of their circumstances. People who act on the world rather than having the world act on them. That are powerful, not powerless. And the measure of that, in my view, and I think I draw on the work of Anders Ericsson, the world's expertise expert, who wasn't measuring IQ, he was measuring the process it took to build expertise. I draw on the work of Carol Dweck and the way she talks about how your understanding of yourself as a learner, your capacity to grow and change, impacts your learning. And in fact, to come back to that question, the foundational underpinning of Carol Dweck's work is that the idea of intelligence is a malleable concept, and not malleable over generations, malleable in a lifetime, that we literally learn to become smarter, and that developing habits of mind, the behaviors that help us solve increasingly difficult problems, are the behaviors we develop when we go into our learning zone. And so we make those hard things easy. So the question that kicked this off was about our kids' IQs falling. Maybe, are they? I don't care. Does IQ measure something that's valuable? I don't really think so. What I'm interested in is, are we preparing students for a world that is rapidly changing and increasingly complex? And it's a set of developmental behaviors, not a fixed measure that's going to set them up to succeed, not just succeed, but thrive in that world. And that's what an agile learner does. The top tier of my learnership matrix, the agile learner is someone who thrives in that rapidly changing and increasingly complex world. But listen, folks, I'll throw back to
Sebastian?
Sebastian, thank you. Sorry, Sebastian, I lost your name there for a second there. You guys, it's your Saturday morning. So I'm going to let you
Well,
go and enjoy your day. It's my Saturday evening. I'm going to go to bed. So, Sebastian, I'll throw back to you to wrap up.
well, it was all worth it, honestly. Thank you so much for all the valuable info, and thank you, Jane, for all your input. We're really looking forward to collaborating with you guys in the future as well, for the sake of our teachers in Romania and for the sake of education here and anywhere else for that matter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking with us all the way to the end. Vă mulțumim tuturor pentru participare, pentru interes și pentru deschiderea de a reflecta împreună la aceste teme atât de importante pentru educație. Sperăm ca ideile discutate astăzi să vă fie utile în activitatea la clasă și să vă ofere inspirație în lucrul cu elevii. Vă dorim mult succes și multă bucurie în ceea ce faceți zi de zi pentru educație. O zi frumoasă tuturor!